be right. There must be people, jolly, happy people, knocking on your door every now and then, still wanting to be Santa, because it would be a gift being a Santa. I would love it.
Yeah, that's correct. It's not just a job. You get paid for the job, but I think it's just a great opportunity for making other people happy, So, yeah.
Now, you will have to have a working with children clearance, am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. We just need a clear criminal history, so just because you are working with children, so we have to be sure that, they are capable to do it. And the other thing, we will provide the training. We have a Santa school, so we will have that one in New Zealand. So they will be trained to perform with Santa, because we have other sessions that are special that we will prepare them for them, like pet sessions and also sensitive Santa.
Jeremy.
Can you give us a secret that they teach you at Santa school?
Oh, we teach you how to answer any questions that you might get, like how old are you, Santa, or where are you, reindeer, or, so many questions that the kids can have for you.
It's a fantastic idea.
I'm actually tempted. I'm tempted.
Look, if they change hotel checkouts to 11, I'll be there. I'll be jolly. I'll be there with my Santa suit at 5 past.
Our guest here, Viviana, he likes to get up late. So hopefully if the Santa thing is on at 3 p.m, he may be able to do it. But look, all the best for it. Finally, for those who are driving across the Auckland Harbour Bridge, going through the Vic Tunnel, where can you enter?
Yes, so if you want more information, you want to apply, or you just have some questions, please just contact us on our website, seentobelieve.com.nz.
Good on you, Viviana. That's us. Go and be a Santa. That's the panel. Linda, Helen Ann, Jeremy Ahmed, thank you very, very much.
I'm just going to say there's going to be a strawberry shortage, which is a bigger concern for Christmas. Christmas ruined. No Santa, no strawberries.
No Santa, no strawberries. Happy Thursday to you too, Linda. I'm Wallace Chaffin, back tomorrow. Friday, 3:45. Lisa Owen and Cheekboy next. See you later.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te rangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, 3 credible sightings of a Marokopa man missing for 18 months with his 3 young children. Tom Phillips, who was driving a stolen ute, apparently restocked at Bunnings before being recognised by locals. The investigation's top cop is live. ACT leader David Seymour says no thanks to working with New Zealand first. So is that a hard no? Wayne's Waterworld, Auckland's mayor reveals some posh port plans, including a tidal pool and outdoors theatre. Ports of Auckland CEO Roger Gray dives in. It's a scandemic, endless text aimed at pinching your money. A Kiwi company reckons it's got a solution. Well, we've got the details. And is it time for Auckland Zoo's last elephant to pack her trunk and move to her forever home?
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. Police believe other people are helping a Waikato man who has been missing for 18 months with his children. Tom Phillips disappeared from his Marokopa home with his 3 children in December 2021, but was seen driving a bronze 2003 Toyota Hilux ute yesterday. Inspector Will Loughran says Mr Phillips is concealing his identity and is likely being helped by other people.
We believe there are people in the community that know where Tom is, and we also believe they are assisting him. I am urging those people to get in contact with us. We want to bring the children home and bring them back to their grandparents, their mother, their siblings who have not seen them for 18 months.
Tom Phillips was also seen at a Bunnings car park in Te Rapa, Hamilton, and was involved in an altercation in Kawhia last night. A report into the fatal boat capsize in Kaikoura that claimed the lives of 5 people shows a fuel leak may have contributed to their deaths. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission is now calling on Maritime New Zealand to urgently address the potentially lethal safety issue with commercial boat fuel systems. Its Chief Investigator of Accidents, Naveen Kuzupakalam, says it is the first time the Commission has investigated an incident of this kind.
Flaws in the vessel's fuel system almost certainly allowed fuel to leak into the air pocket of the upturned vessel and very likely reduced the survivability of the accident.
The first psychiatrist to formally interview Lauren Dickerson believes she killed her children out of control, not love. Mrs Dickerson is on trial in the High Court in Christchurch for the murder of her 3 young daughters in Timaru in 2021. She denies the charges, instead seeking a verdict of insanity and infanticide. Crown witness, forensic psychiatrist Simone McLevy, says Lauren Dickerson's explanation of the deaths to her, of not wanting her children to suffer, did not add up.
It was quite clear to me that the defendant, beyond her intended suicide, did not want her children, firstly, to be without a mother, but more the case that she did not wish for her children to be mothered by another mother.
Simone McLevy says Mrs Dickerson also said she did not want to leave her husband the burden of single parenting. The government's action plan on forestry has been met with criticism by locals who were hoping for more concrete solutions. Key steps the forestry minister announced at a public briefing included immediately ramping efforts to clear woody debris. Our reporter Kate Green was there.
The action plan got a lukewarm reception at best and outrage at worst. When Penny Henare said the regeneration of native bush wasn't a suitable blanket solution for Tairāwhiti's erosion-prone ground, some people walked out in disgust. 2 new roles were announced, a resource management advisor and a facilitator to identify new ways for the government to work with local communities. But specific changes, such as the immediate halt to clear felling recommended by an independent panel, were lacking. Locals say the lack of urgency on an issue that's been plaguing them for years is just insulting.
The ACT Party says it doesn't see the point in talking about New Zealand First potentially joining it in a coalition with National because it won't happen. New Zealand First reached 4% in last night's Newshub Reid research poll, close to the 5% threshold needed to return to Parliament. ACT has definitively ruled out working with New Zealand First and its leader, Winston Peters. On Newshub's numbers, National and ACT could form the next government together. ACT's deputy leader, Brooke van der Velden, says she's confident New Zealand First won't return.
What we are saying is that ACT and National can work together and form a close government, with ACT playing a large part of that government. And New Zealand First on these polls is not in Parliament, so it's not an issue for us to discuss.
National is refusing to rule out government arrangement with New Zealand First. Police have scaled down their search and rescue operation for a swimmer off Kapiti Coast north of Wellington. They received reports a person had possibly gone into the water off Raumati Beach. An Air Force Poseidon aircraft training at the time helped in the search but has now been stood down. Police say currently just ground searches are continuing. To sport, and Silver Ferns coach Dame Nolene Taurua is demanding more grit and greater discipline from her side if they're to beat Jamaica and stay alive in the defence of their World Cup netball title. A shock draw with South Africa this morning in Cape Town means New Zealand must beat Jamaica tonight or rely on a superior goal difference over the hosts to reach the semi-finals. After losing to Jamaica at last year's Commonwealth Games, Dame Nolene knows her side needs to make a strong start.
They hit hard right from the start. We coughed up the first couple of balls, so that's something that we've been talking about and working on, and I think we're actually tracking nicely in that respect, but it's going to be real pure discipline and our ability to fight for every ball.
There are 12 changes to the All Blacks starting lineup for Saturday's Bledisloe Cup test in Dunedin following last weekend's comfortable win in Melbourne. With the Rugby Championship and Bledisloe Cup trophies locked away for the year, 3 players are also set to make their test debuts. Coach Ian Foster has named flanker Samapini Fino and wing Sean Stevenson in the starting lineup, while midfielder Dallas McLeod is set to earn his first cap from the bench.
We've got a lot of guys that have been with us who train well and really believe with what's coming around the corner. This is a great opportunity to give a few guys a run.
As Sam Cane returns from injury to captain the side and Damien McKenzie is at first 5. And paracyclist Nicole Murray has qualified for the gold medal ride off the 3 kilometre individual pursuit C5 category at the World Champs in Glasgow. And that's the news.
The rise of the minor parties.
I'm very pleased to see that ACT and National could form a government, but ACT has a significant part of that government.
A pay rise offer for secondary school teachers.
It's a historic offer, and I'm just really, really hopeful that this goes well over the next week.
And a surge in backyard bird feeders, but is it good for them?
The birds will eat anything, pretty much, but like us, they can eat too much of a good thing.
Rise and shine with Corin Dan and me, Ingrid Hipkiss. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland mainly fine with isolated showers. Waikato to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine, but frosty tonight and tomorrow morning. Tahape to Kapiti, partly cloudy with isolated showers, fine tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, a few showers retreating to the east coast tomorrow and becoming fine elsewhere. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland mainly fine, isolated showers in southern Marlborough, a few showers for Westland and Buller tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, remaining showers clearing, fine and frosty tomorrow, then showers spreading north tomorrow evening. Southland and Fiordland, showers about Fiordland and the south coast, rain spreading north tomorrow afternoon with snow possible above 600 metres, then clearing at night. And for the Chatham Islands, periods of rain, possibly heavy with hail, southwest gales, all easing tomorrow. RNZ National. It is coming up to 5:08 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Nā mihi ana, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A Marokopa man who went bush with his 3 young children and has been evading police for 18 months may have been on their doorstep this whole time. There's been 3 credible sightings of Tom Phillips over the past 2 days, but there's been no sign of Jada, Maverick and Ember. The 36-year-old was driving a stolen ute that Checkpoint understands was spotted by locals who then recognised Phillips behind the wheel and chased him. But he got away in the dark and the vehicle still hasn't been found. It was sighting number 3. He'd been seen in the brown bronze 2003 Toyota Hilux flat deck ute in Te Awamutu early yesterday afternoon and later that day at Bunnings in Te Rapa. Well, joining us now is Inspector Will Lochran. Kia ora, Inspector.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Where do you think he is now?
Yeah, and it's a big part of our investigation at the moment is seeking the public's help to locate their vehicle of interest, which is the bronze-coloured Toyota Hilux flat deck ute, which was last seen in Kawhia last night, following that altercation that Tom Phillips had with a person known to him.
Okay, so do you have a ballpark of where you think he might be hiding out?
At this stage, we're making a number of inquiries and the Kawhia community, as well as a number of our communities on the west coast there, will see an increased police presence at the moment while we work through our inquiries to try and locate that vehicle, which is really, really critical to the next stages of our investigation.
You've been very clear that someone is helping him. Who's helping him?
Yeah, I have been from the beginning. We've been in regular contact with a number of people that are closely associated to Tom Phillips, and we've always held a view that he has had support. What I'm urging is that person or those people involved who have been supporting Tom, now's the time to speak to police. Clearly something's happened yesterday following this altercation, and we're reaching out to those people to come forward and speak to police about what they know. We are focused on bringing the children home, and they are at the forefront of what we need to do here. So that's our message to Tom and to the people that are supporting him.
So to be clear, Inspector, do you have no idea about who is helping him? Or are you talking to people you think are helping him?
We are speaking to a number of people, and because of the
people who are helping him, Inspector, can you be a bit clearer about whether you are speaking to people you know are helping him?
Again, because of the sensitivity around the operation, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that point. But what I can say is we are speaking to a number of people who are closely associated to Tom and have done so for some time.
Okay, so Kawhia to Te Awamutu, where he's stolen the truck, it appears. That's a bit of a hike. How do you reckon he got there?
Again, that's part of our ongoing inquiries, because we know we have a sighting of that stolen ute in Pukuru, which is just south of Te Awamutu, at 12:30pm. Then at 4pm we have another sighting of Tom Phillips at the Bunnings car park in Te Rapa. and then we've got Tom at 6:45pm up in Kawhia. So what we're currently doing is working through those movements to try and establish where he's been and whether he's had any contact with anyone along the way.
Okay, so no kids with him at the time. Do you suspect someone's looking after them while he came into town?
Again, that's part of our investigation. I don't want to make an assumption around that, but at the time it was pretty clear that the children weren't with Tom.
All right, there's a bit to get through. So, Bunnings, did he purchase anything? There was lots of stuff on the back of the ute. What was it, and do you think it's for his use?
That's what our investigation team are doing today, is going through CCTV footage and identifying what Tom purchased and what he did at Bunnings in Te Rapa. And that is a key part of our investigation, obviously determining what was purchased and what that tells us.
It's pretty risky for him to come out, and he hasn't been seen for a long time. Do you think he's getting desperate and he needed supplies?
We've always known over this 18 months that it was always, if Tom had made a mistake, we would obviously jump on that. And what's happened yesterday is clearly a person that was familiar to him recognised him in the Hamilton area and contacted police. So from that bit of information, we've followed that line of inquiry and have been able to identify him in Te Amutu earlier in the day, as well as the Kawhia incident later that night. And what our teams are starting to discover from the CCTV that we are reviewing is that it's clear that Tom has changed his appearance and he's trying to disguise his face from the general public.
How so? Just by wearing a hat or something else?
Yeah, we're working through that information so we can provide the public with accurate information on that. But again, concealing his identity through wearing a face mask and a number of other means.
Can you tell us what happened with the altercation? As we understand it, someone recognised the vehicle as a stolen vehicle and then recognised him, and then what happened?
Yeah, a person associated to Tom was involved in that altercation with him. When they identified that it was him in the vehicle, they immediately contacted police. We deployed a number of police resources out to the Kawhia area, including an Eagle helicopter as well, to support our search for that vehicle. Unfortunately, we didn't find the vehicle last night, and that search continues today, and that's why we're putting pictures of that ute into the out to the public today, seeking their help to try and identify where it could be.
Thanks for your time, Inspector. That is Inspector Will Loughran. It is almost 5:15. Kia amo tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Polls and fiscal holes have been the talk at Parliament today as the latest survey shows the right bloc could form a government. The Labour government is counting down until the campaign. Its leader says October's election isn't a foregone conclusion. In the meantime, it's rejecting unproved claims of a mega revenue hole in its books. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
After months of ministerial mayhem, Labour is paying the price in the polls.
We've been through a bit of a storm in recent times, quite both literally and figuratively.
The latest survey contributing to the unenviable trend. Support for Labour continues to fall.
There is no clear winner coming out of any of the opinion polls at the moment, and that means that it's game on.
Only the latest News Hub Reid Research poll does show a clear winner. It gives National and ACT the numbers to comfortably form a government. But there is a silver lining for Labour, the preferred Prime Minister stakes. Labour leader Chris Hipkins is ahead on 24%.
I like to think I'm a likeable guy.
Nationals' Christopher Luxon dropped 0.5 points to 15.9%. He's brushing off the result.
It's not about Chris Hipkins or myself, it's really about who's got the best plan to lead this country.
But the leaders are important, especially during the election campaign when they're largely responsible for selling their party's vision to the country. Labour is hoping to take advantage of this.
We've got 3 more parliamentary sitting weeks to go, and then the balloon will go up and the campaign will be on. And then we'll be absolutely focused on campaigning. But we've still got some governing to do between now and then.
Support for both ACT and the Greens increased in the latest survey, a consistent theme across polls this year. The minor parties appear to be capitalising off of unhappiness with the 2 major parties. ACT is using the increase of support to put pressure on National by ruling out working with New Zealand First in coalition.
We can't work with Winston Peters. Nobody can.
Christopher Luxon has so far avoided ruling out working with Winston Peters.
They're not a feature. They're not in Parliament, and they're not looking like they're going to make it into Parliament.
But last night's poll shows New Zealand First is creeping closer to the 5% threshold to get into Parliament. Support for the party climbed to 4.1%.
The packed halls all around the country are evidence that there's a surge on, and it'll go all the way to the election.
Even away from Parliament, New Zealand First leader Winston Peters is putting a cat among the pigeons. He last night issued a brief statement claiming without evidence there was a whopping $20 billion hole in government revenue. The ACT party quickly piped up, suggesting the hole was actually closer to $30 billion. There were also claims the Finance Minister Grant Robertson had met twice with public service bosses to ask them to cut spending by 10%. Again, no evidence.
Only Grant Robertson can answer how bad it is.
And so, National's Nicola Willis tried to get to the bottom of the fiscal hole claims in question time.
How big is his hole? And do...
That is not in the public interest, I can assure you.
Grant Robertson did meet with public service bosses yesterday and, among other things, spending restraint was discussed. But he says that's in line with actions the government has taken all year to cut costs. And while the government admits the books are deteriorating with deficits getting bigger, it is rejecting claims of a mega revenue hole.
The idea that we're trying to fill a massive hole like that is just farcical. That is a fanciful number.
All will be revealed next month when Treasury publishes its pre-election forecasts.
Katie Scotcher there. So it's a no from David Seymour when it comes to working with Winston Peters after the election. And the latest News Hub Read Research political poll suggests he wouldn't need to, with National and ACT with the numbers to comfortably govern alone. But New Zealand First is inching closer to the 5% threshold. To talk more about this, ACT leader David Seymour joins us now. Kia ora, David.
Good afternoon.
Hey, just to be absolutely clear, is that a hard no to working with Winston Peters in any form, including, say, a memorandum of understanding in a government?
Well, the answer to your question is yes, but let's just get a bit of context here. The big news out of that poll is that ACT and National can govern alone, as you rightly mentioned, and New Zealand First actually nowhere near it. What they're proposing is to be the solution to the problem that, as we all know, they themselves created by putting Labour in place in the first place. On the other hand, I think the challenges that New Zealand faces are serious. This fiscal hole is real. It's coming from multiple sources that all line up, including Grant Robertson himself, that admits the recent meetings are real. So when your package from Katie Scotcher said without evidence, that's not quite true. It turned out to be correct. And if we're going to solve these kinds of problems of inflation, lawlessness and division, then it's going to take a strong ACT National team working together, not another 3 years of chaos. I think that's what people are trying to get away from, and the one thing that New Zealand First can offer.
So I want to focus in on how you might see this government working, and that includes whether or not you'll work with other people. So you said a hard no to Winston Peters. So just to be clear, because polls are indicative, if you were in a situation where it was a choice between foregoing being in government or working with Winston, would you forego being in government?
Well, that's not a choice that's remotely on the menu. I mean, for one,
I'm asking you, there's all sorts of combinations that could happen. So, you've called it clearly in some ways, but I just want to be clear on this point.
Yeah, so if your answer is, if your question is, would we work with them, no, we wouldn't. Our goal is to maximise the party vote for ACT so that ACT and National together can join hands around the cabinet table and start carrying out, frankly, a rescue job that is going to be required after the damage done by the current government. These problems are very serious, and this fiscal hole is just the latest part of it.
Okay.
It's going to need to be dealt with in a coherent manner. I don't think anybody seriously thinks, while it's entertaining and it's fun to speculate, I don't think anyone's going to seriously believe that having New Zealand first, giving them another chance after all the others they've had, is in New Zealand's best interest right now.
OK, so polling at around 4.1% New Zealand first. Would it be your preference that the National Party and Christopher Luxon give a decisive call on whether they would work with New Zealand first so that people have an opportunity to redistribute their vote then?
Well, it's really not up to me. It's up to them what they do. Certainly,
it is,
everyone
but I'm
has
asking what your preference would be.
Well, I'm not going to express preferences for their behaviour. Everyone has their own style. I'm pretty straight up. There's not much that you'll wonder what I think. I think that's the best way to be, so people can make their own choices. But I would say I suspect that Chris Luxon, when it comes down to it, based on knowing Chris for almost 10 years, I think Chris is a little bit too principled to work with New Zealand first, and so I suspect they'll get there anyway, sooner or later.
OK, as you say, you're pretty open, so here's another one. Is there ever a situation where you think that the smaller party in a coalition should take on the role of Prime Minister, someone from that party?
Well, that has happened once in our history. I think it was in the 30s with the Liberal and Reform parties. But other than that one historical example, I don't think that's the norm in democracies around the world, let alone New Zealand.
So would it be something that you might ask for?
It's not something that has occurred to me, mainly because ACT is not focused on positions for politicians, but rather policies for people. Our goal is to make sure that we make sense of the treaty in a modern democratic society. That's not happening right now. We shift the pendulum back to consequences for offenders and rights for victims, and that we get rid of the excessive government waste and regulation that is stifling wealth in this country.
Interesting to talk to you. Thank you for your time. That is ACT leader David Seymour there. It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Don't forget you can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to head to the headlines. Ko Anna Ano tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. A Waikato man who went missing with his children 18 months ago has been spotted 3 times in 2 days in a stolen ute. Police believe Tom Phillips is likely getting help to remain away from his Marokopa property with Jada, Maverick and Ember. Inspector Will Loughran told Checkpoint the people aiding Phillips need to help them get the children home. Labour's rejecting New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters' claim there's a $20 billion gap in the Crown accounts. ACT says it's closer to $30 billion. National's Nicola Willis tried to get to the bottom of it in Parliament this afternoon, but asking Finance Minister Grant Robertson about the size of his hole brought only laughter. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Chris Hipkins is brushing off the latest political poll, which gives National and ACT the numbers they need to form a government. The News Hub Reid Research poll put New Zealand First on the way to the 5% threshold needed to return to Parliament. ACT leader David Seymour told Checkpoint his party would not work with them. A man in the US city of Pittsburgh has been sentenced to death for the murder of 11 people at the city's Tree of Life synagogue. The jury also found Robert Bowers guilty of all 63 charges stemming from the 2018 attack. And police have scaled down their search and rescue operation for a swimmer reported missing off Kapiti Coast north of Wellington at about 12:30 this afternoon. Police say they are now only conducting ground checks at Raumati Beach. Now a quick look at the roads, and for Auckland commuters due to a crash, the left northbound lane on the Harbour Bridge is blocked. Expect some delays, and a breakdown is causing some delays just after the Market Road off-ramp southbound. Those are the headlines, Lisa.
Ngā mihi Tēnā Anna. Mayor Wayne Brown's unveiled a vision to turn Auckland's working port into a sophisticated waterfront playground for the public, with stage 1 of the development possible in the next 5 years. Councillors have been meeting behind closed doors to discuss possible options for the land that largely belongs to Ports of Auckland, which in turn is owned by the council but operated independently. Wayne Brown says a revamped waterfront could include an urban beach or a tidal pool where people can actually touch the water, an amphitheatre and an international event and exhibition venue, and a Te Ao Māori Centre. He's promising public consultation, but what does Ports of Auckland think about potentially being evicted? CEO Roger Gray joins us now. That sounds terribly inviting, doesn't it, Roger? A tidal pool at the harbour's edge?
It certainly is an exciting vision that Eki Panuku put together for the Mayor, Lisa, I agree. And certainly over a significant period of time, I'm sure that's what we'll have for the forefront of Auckland, but not in the short term.
When did you find out about these relatively detailed plans?
We've been working in partnership with the Mayor's office and Eki Panuku, GHD and Flagstaff since the beginning of this process. So we've been intimately involved in this the whole way through, and we're aware of the meetings that councillors were having about it.
Not included in them, though? And had you seen the concepts and the ideas of what would be involved in which bits of the port that they want?
Yep. We have been... we weren't involved in the formal briefings of the councillors, but we have been involved, and I've seen the Eki Panuku plans and each of the progressive drafts. So, no, we've been directly involved in this, and we're very supportive of the initial move of Captain Cook and Marsden and handing those back. But it is predicated, Lisa, on us being able to invest in Bledisloe by building the Bledisloe North Wharf and another cargo handling facility on that wharf.
Okay, so in a nutshell, explain to people, what are you using the areas that they would co-opt into this grand plan? What are you using those areas for specifically?
Marsden and Bledisloe, Marsden and Captain Cook's Wharf are used as part of the roll-on, roll-off trade, which is the delivery of cars, the delivery of buses, trains, even armoured fighting vehicles went across the wharf last week. So they're used as part of that larger area in conjunction with Bledisloe, and what we'd do is we'd hand those back and intensify our operations on the Bledisloe Wharf.
So you could move all the cars that you get coming and going onto that one wharf?
If we were able to build an additional facility and an additional wharf, yes, we would, and that's the position that we've been very clear with councillors from the beginning.
How long would that take? Because in making his announcement today, the Mayor has said in the next 5 years returning some chunks to public use. So could you get moving with your cars within 5 years?
Yep. We could have the whole, subject to consenting and approvals, we could have the wharf built and also the car and cargo handling facility built, and we could be ready to go within that 5-year timeframe. Yep. We've certainly worked on that timeframe with the Mayor's office. How much would that cost? Yeah, that's something that we're working through, but I would have said it would cost, up to around $100 million to in capital, and if that's the cost that we need to invest, then we'll be looking to recover that from our customers.
Right, okay. So also the Maritime Union has put out a statement today saying all of this talk about reclaiming the port and places doubt over the business there and could affect the economics of the port. What are your thoughts on that?
I think while we have speculation on the future, how much gets handed back, etc., you always run the risk of customers becoming unsure about the future of the port and therefore the ongoing trade. So being able to lock this down, get a clear step forward, being able to understand and get approval to do that investment on Bledisloe, I think actually sets us up better for the future because we'll have some certainty for the next decade or two.
Appreciate your time, Roger. That is CEO of Ports of Auckland, Roger Gray. The Silver Ferns were shocked by South Africa at the Netball World Cup this morning, with the Proteas holding them to a draw. The Silver Ferns have had little time to regroup and they are playing an even tougher opponent in Jamaica in just a few hours. Sports reporter Bridget Tunnicliffe is in Cape Town and she joins us now. How did it all start unravelling for New Zealand, Bridget?
Well, the protests just wouldn't go away. It looked like New Zealand were in control, even when they were coming at them. But the noise in that stadium was unbelievable. I think at one point the South African crowd were singing hymns. So they probably added five goals to the South African cause. I think some eyebrows have been raised about why Dame Nolene Taurua took the captain Amelia Ekenasio off in the third quarter. She's our captain, and she brought on Tiana Maturo, who is the replacement player, so not particularly experienced. Of all the coaches in at the World Cup, Dame Nolene has probably made the most rotations. I don't know if that has been the right approach, but that last 5 minutes, the Proteas just chipped away, and I don't think the players could quite believe what they had achieved at the end of the game. At post-match press conference, the South African coach, former Australian Diamonds coach Norma Plummer, said the key for them was really breaking down the Silver Ferns zone defence.
They've always played the zone, so you get used to it after a while, and you've got to find the holes. And I was really, really proud of them because we only really had the session, a short one yesterday and the session this morning, to actually try and have players who have never played in it before have to get to understand it.
I imagine it's going to be pretty electric tonight, Silver Ferns in Jamaica. How tough are Jamaica going to be?
Very tough. Jamaica actually beat South Africa earlier this week by about 18 goals, so there's obviously a gap there. We are definitely going in as underdogs. Fortunately for the Silver Ferns, if they can afford to lose this game, and they're still probably going to make the semi-finals, they would have to wait for the final game of the day between South Africa and Uganda, but South Africa would have to beat Uganda by a heap of goals, which is very unlikely to happen. Jamaica beat us at last year's Commonwealth Games. That they have a double threat. They have the best goal shoot in the world in Janelle Fowler, very tall, and at the other end of the court, Shamira Sterling is probably the best goalkeeper in the world. So they've got two massive threats at either end of the court. Based on what I've seen from the Silver Ferns so far, they're really up against it. They're going to have to play the best netball we've seen so far from them in this tournament.
Thanks for the update, Bridget. Bridget Tunnicliffe live from Cape Town there. It is 27 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Anand Zaki. Anand, business credit demand is rising strongly. What's driving that?
Good evening, Lisa. Well, perhaps a sign of some positivity here. Firms are signalling a more upbeat outlook despite the slowing economy and higher interest rates. We have data from credit agency Equifax. They say business credit applications rose more than 6% in the second quarter compared to a year ago. That's the biggest increase in 2 years. Loan applications also rose strongly. And basically, the rise in credit demand was across the board, across various industries. Companies are seeing more demand for their goods and services as well. And Equifax say generally a rise in credit applications mean businesses are ready to spend or invest. And it means they're feeling a little bit more positive about their outlook. And it's a sign that demand is improving as well. So perhaps some indication that the worst of the pressure is behind us, although it might be a little bit too soon to make a conclusion on that. Now, of the various industries, transport saw the biggest jump in credit demand. That was followed by accommodation and food services. Maybe a sign there of the recovering tourism industry. And we heard about how well that sector is rebounding in yesterday's jobs data. Manufacturing, another sector with strong credit demand as well. And just lastly, trade credit, on the other hand, was a little bit softer. Equifax say businesses are tightening up there just to cope with the rising costs, which is still a big problem for many in the economy.
Anand, this next story looks tasty. Kiwi company signed a big deal with the world's biggest frozen potato chip maker, Yum Yum.
Yes, I mean, we've all heard of McCain fries. I mean, we've probably all tried their frozen fries on a lazy night or their hash browns for breakfast. They are a behemoth in the world of frozen potato products. They're a Canadian company, and they've just signed a $12 million deal with New Zealand's Scott Technology, who make automated systems. So Scott Technology will build a materials handling system for McCain. It'll be built at their European factory and then installed in McCain's processing plant in Alberta, Canada. And their system will combine multiple production lines into one and help the world's craving of fries and hash browns, and maybe some of your cravings there as well, Lisa. Now, Scott Technology say the deal is part of its strategy to stick with proven products and to go back to established customers, because McCain is actually a long-term customer of Scott Technology, and they're obviously happy with Scott, and so they're coming back for more. So a big win for Scott Technology. And just a little side note there, the company announced in June that it was going through a review of its ownership structure with possible new investment. We didn't hear any new information about that today.
And the numbers from the market, Anand?
The local top 50 index, Lisa, that's fallen for a third straight day, down 25 points or 0.2% to 11,937. The big news overnight was the downgrade of the US credit rating by the ratings agency Fitch. Markets didn't seem to react too badly to that. In fact, a number of commentators thought the downgrade was a little bit puzzling. And just finally, the Kiwi dollar is trading at 60.7 US cents and 92.9 Australian.
Thank you, Anand. Ka kite Anand Zaki there with Business News. 3 credible sightings, an altercation in the street, and police are renewing calls for sightings of missing Marokopa man Tom Phillips. The 36-year-old has been missing for 18 months with his 3 children, Jada, Maverick and Ember. Police have revealed Phillips was spotted in Te Awamutu yesterday afternoon, then at the Bunnings in Te Rapa, before he travelled to Kawhia, where he got into a scrap with a local who recognised him. Officers are now focusing their inquiry on a stolen brown bronze 2003 Toyota Hilux flat deck ute, which they haven't been able to locate. It's the first confirmed sighting of Phillips in 18 months, but there is yet to be any sign of the children. Reporter Libby Kirkby-McLeod has the story.
Another plea from a police officer who spent the last year and a half looking for a dad and his 3 kids.
Tom, we need you to come in and speak to us and resolve this.
Inspector Will Lochran says there were 3 sightings of Tom Phillips yesterday, and police have released a photo of the ute he was driving.
Through those 3 separate incidents we had yesterday, we were able to piece a number of things together, which gave us confirmation that we believe the person driving that vehicle is Thomas Phillips.
It's a 2003 bronze-coloured Toyota Hilux flat-deck ute, and in the photo has a number of containers and rolled-up netting in the back.
I can confirm that the vehicle we are seeking is stolen.
Inspector Lochran says the police believe there are people in the community who know where Phillips is.
And we also believe they are assisting him. I am urging those people to get in contact with us. We want to bring the children home and bring them back to their grandparents, their mother, their siblings who have not seen them for 18 months. The family are desperately missing them. And again, we urge those who are supporting Tom to reach out to us and speak with police about what you know.
Inspector Lochran said the first sighting of Tom Phillips was near Te Awamutu about 12:30 yesterday afternoon. About 4 p.m, he visited the Bunnings in Te Rapa, where he was recognised by someone known to him. He was then involved in an altercation about 6:45 p.m. in Kawhia, an hour's drive away.
On Kawhia Road, there was an altercation between Tom and a member of the community. That altercation led to that person ringing police and allowed us to piece a number of things together, which led to an urgent police response once we had identified that it was likely it was Tom Phillips.
Did that person involved in the altercation, had they recognised Tom Phillips?
Yes.
Checkpoint understands locals recognised the stolen ute and chased Phillips, who drove at high speed down Kawhia Road towards Kawhia. The vehicle is understood to have been stolen from Te Awamutu yesterday. During the pursuit, it's understood Phillips turned his lights off. At some stage, a gate at Te Kauri Lodge was also damaged. Inspector Loughran says Tom Phillips might not look like the man whose picture was widely shared the first time he and his children disappeared.
What we can say is that Tom's is concealing his identity, and we have some information around that. But the investigation team have been able to put a number of things together that satisfy us that it is Tom Phillips that was in possession of that vehicle last night, and we believe is the person that has been sighted in these 3 separate locations.
Phillips and his children were reported missing in December 2021, and it was not for the first time. In September 2021, they disappeared for about 20 days, sparking an extensive search operation. They eventually turned up out of the blue at Phillips' family farm and revealed they'd been living off the grid in dense bush. Phillips was charged with wasting police resources but failed to show up to court. He then took the children and disappeared again. Locals in Kawhia aren't too keen to speak to RNZ, but they reckon he's long gone. One of the shops has confirmed they've shared CCTV footage with police. Last month, the older sister of the 3 children, Jubilee Dawson, told Mata's Maharangi Forbes she believed Phillips is being helped.
I think they'd either be in the bush and Tom would be not receiving help, which I hope isn't the case, or I think somebody is helping him.
What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is that they're out there wondering why we haven't come to get them.
Is that why you've decided to speak?
Also just that it's been so long and there's nothing else we can really do.
Police are asking anyone with information about Phillips and the missing children, no matter how small, to come forward.
And if you were listening to that story on radio, the video version will be on our webpage. It is 18 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, do send us your feedback. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Anei Anna, mina pita pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. The ACT Party won't talk about New Zealand First potentially joining it in a coalition with National after the October election, saying it's never going to happen. New Zealand First reached above 4% in last night's News Hub Reid research poll. It needs 5% to return to Parliament. ACT has ruled out working with Winston Peters, and Deputy Leader Brooke van der Velden says she's confident the party won't return. The poll gives Labour just 42 MPs. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission is urging Maritime New Zealand to urgently address a potentially lethal safety issue with commercial boat fuel systems. It comes after a report showed a fuel leak may have been a factor in last year's fatal boat capsize in Kaikoura. 5 people lost their lives. Jewellery chain Michael Hill says burglaries and ram raids have fallen since it improved shop security, but CEO Daniel Bracken says he's devastated by an aggravated robbery by 5 people at the founding Whangarei store yesterday, in which 2 people were injured. Israel's Supreme Court will later hear an appeal that seeks to overturn a law limiting the power of judges to quash government decisions they deem unreasonable. The legislation was passed by the Israeli Parliament last week and has caused widespread disruption. And the Australian Defence Force says human remains have been found amid the debris of an army helicopter that crashed in North Queensland on Friday. 4 crew members were aboard the MRH-90 Taipan aircraft. Those are the headlines now. Just an update from Waka Kotahi. All state highways in the central North Island have now reopened, and that is including State Highway 1, the Desert Road. But winter driving conditions remain present, so take extra care. Lisa.
Kia ora rā e ho. It might seem like you're stuck in a scandemic, bombed by texts, tempting you with phantom packages for pickups, or warning you of overdue tolls. Yep, had a few of those. Well, a Kiwi mobile payment app reckons it could have the solution in an automated scam verification tool for iPhones. It filters scam SMS messages and dumps them into a junk folder. Well, joining us now is Dollar founder and CEO Ben Lynch. Hi, Ben.
Evening, Lisa.
How does this work? In simple terms, please.
Yeah, so it's almost as simple as you described in your intro, where it's much like your email spam folder that works, that everyone's probably familiar with. And we've just brought it to iPhone users. Apple allows certified apps, to filter and detect spam for any unknown contacts. So we don't get to filter your text message from your mum or your friends and family, anyone saved in your contacts, but anyone that sends you a message from an unknown number, you can opt in to have that essentially filtered by us, and we can, pretty easily from that point detect whether it in fact is a toll road you've missed or, a bank login code, which looks very suspicious to a dodgy URL.
So I'm wondering then, that means it will also catch numbers of people who are contacting you who may not have contacted you before, but they are legitimate.
Exactly, yeah. So there is obviously a privacy component to this piece. Now, in that scenario, anything identified as a personal message is just deleted from our servers. But what happens even early stages in our beta testing is that we can catch a lot of this spam messaging on the device itself. And so no one even reads it, let alone Apple or our servers. And so, if you think about who the spammers are trying to be, there's really only sort of 5 banks, NZTA, New Zealand Post and NZ, and, 1 or 2 others. So a lot of the work we do, probably 90% of it gets caught on the device itself. And so no one gets to see, the person that's coming to pick up your Trade Me sale or something, some random phone number there.
So does this learn? Does it accrue information and then go, oh, okay, I'm now familiar with this scam, so I'll definitely block that out? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, scammers are using technology to try and entice people to do these things. And it's our chance to use some technology to try and, get the upper hand on them. And so part of that is learning and quickly identifying the common scams that are coming in. Like, they're not too sophisticated. They send a lot of messages to a lot of people, and only 0.1% have to click on those links. So as those are coming in real time, we're learning all the time, and then we can block it the next time if we missed it. And the hope is that we can start sharing some of this learnings with the likes of the telecommunications companies, the banks, and then the likes of the government departments, certainly NZ and the DIA, that have a role to play in this kind of coordinated response.
So you touched on this a little bit, but people will be very interested in this around privacy. The message comes in and it's filtered. Yeah. Where does it go? Where is it stored? It is in your junk, in the sense, if you were to delete any old text, it goes to junk, right? But is this duplicated somewhere, and what happens to it from that point onwards?
So as I said, we try and detect if it's claiming to be from, say, BNZ and it's a login code, we try and detect that on the device, because we have a few algorithms that sit on the device. And so that's the best case scenario, where no one gets to see any of these messages coming in. Now, we can't always stay ahead of the scams coming in. So if we can't detect it on the device, it gets set to a server, in which case we can then run it against another list of known scams. And very quickly, if we can determine whether it's a personal message, which is not that hard to do, it gets deleted and it's sort of never seen it again from our perspective. But it's important to note that this is an opt-in service, and this is one thing that we're trying to do to combat the scandemic. And as I said earlier, the hope is that we can start sharing the known scams and the kind of messaging that they're scamming with the telcos themselves, who can start blocking it at the network layer so it doesn't even reach you.
Ben, we're out of time. If people are interested, where do they go, please? And is it free?
It is free, and just go to get.dollar.nz from your iPhone and you'll be directed to the App Store and you can use it for free.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate your time. That is Ben Lynch, who is from Dollar. He's the founder and CEO. It is 11 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And right now we have some very important news, so stay tuned. It is titled, "This Little Pigly Finally Found His Way, Not Home, but Into the Trap." Oh no, this doesn't sound good. This afternoon, Auckland's Council's animal management team received a priority call at 3:15 from police to say a roaming pig on State Highway 16, who had avoided capture for the last couple of weeks, have finally succumbed to the lure of food. True to its name, Anna. The pig could no longer ignore the food in the trap set by animal management officers yesterday and wandered into the cage. I wonder what they used. What is it that a pig really, really loves? If it was me, maybe, I don't know, hot chips or something. I'm not sure what they use for the pig. Anyway.
What's happening to the pig?
Yeah, I know. This worries me. Although, read further on, it says the pig will remain a guest at the Henderson Animal Shelter, and I hope they mean guest in the truest sense of the word, until it's claimed. And if the owner owner doesn't claim it, Auckland Council will begin the rehoming adoption process. So if you ever wanted a rogue pig prone to sometimes wandering onto a major motorway as a pet, not to make bacon or sausages from, then you may get a chance to adopt it if its owners don't collect it. Now, the government's plan to shake up forestry has been met with a lukewarm response by locals in Tairāwhiti today. Forestry Minister Peeni Henare announced a 4-step action plan, which included an immediate ramping up of efforts to clear woody debris. But the rest of the initiatives were less solid, a plan to make a plan, and had locals accusing the government of kicking the can down the road. Kate Green was at the announcement.
Locals and stakeholders were, on the whole, unimpressed with the government's announcement, with some even storming out of the briefing. Local man John Kape says it contains no substantive measures to address soil erosion.
There's a lack of detail. There's a welcome measure around a resource management facilitator, but we're expected to wait for a couple of years while the planning process is going through. There is a lack of detail. It looks like the government has kicked the issue out of the election cycle.
John Kape says it feels like the minister has completely dodged the issue of clear felling on erodible land, something the independent inquiry panel called for an immediate halt to. Ngāti Porou spokesperson Hilton Collier says he'd like to have the government take a stronger stance.
Especially those elements around mana whenua involvement, because ultimately mana whenua will be here in 100 years. So I'm pretty confident my great-grandchildren will live with decisions we make today.
The inquiry identified urgent and sweeping implications for mana whenua, going so far as to say Ngāti Porou is at risk of becoming homeless and landless. The government's action plan includes a new facilitator role to build partnerships between the government and the forestry industry, landowners and Māori. Anora Bay local He Rangata of Te Aitanga a Hauiti says the roles must represent a local voice.
I think any roles that are based up here, they've really got to get the right people who are on the ground, not someone out of Wellington, not someone who meets the government tick box, someone who actually knows what's going on here, has been living with it.
He Rangata says her iwi is yet to even be consulted, and they want meaningful engagement with the government, not just a one-off conversation. Tui Warmanhoven, an iwi researcher and Uawa local, says slash and silt aren't her biggest concern.
To me, that will decompose and it will become fertile soil. What I'm worried about is the next event that's going to come, and no planting, no real measures taking place to ensure that we don't lose more land and the deluge that happens.
And Renee Raroa, project lead for the East Coast Exchange, says the government's 4 key actions are underwhelming.
I think a lot of people will be quite hurt that the hope that we felt come through the inquiry feels like in this statement we've backtracked and we haven't been heard on a lot of those.
She says there are no answers on how the work will be resourced, and the plan makes no mention of the restoration of native bush, which the science tells us can improve ground stability and reduce erosion, and therefore cut down silt. The minister prompted walkouts and cries of disagreement from the crowd when he said native bush cover wasn't an appropriate blanket solution to the problem of erosion. Renee Raroa says outrage is understandable.
That really riled people up because we know that's our land use history, and we know and we have wisdoms that teach us how to live in harmony with our forest system covers that we can reclaim. And we are talking about a mosaic of land use, but to be told that it's not suitable for us and the soils aren't right for that is quite heartbreaking.
And with the election approaching, people aren't sure if the plans will even eventuate. Minister Henare says things are already changing. For example, decisions about road repairs and how to fund them.
For some of the longer matters and the longer issues, we have to understand them fully and properly in order for us to be able to respond and support the locals.
Minister Henare and the Environment Minister David Parker will report to Cabinet by the end of the year on the plan's progress.
Auckland Zoo's last remaining elephant, 40-year-old Burma, may have finally found a forever home to live out her twilight years in South Australia. Last year, Australia Zoo pulled the pin on plans to take her just a week before she was set to fly over in her custom crate on board a jumbo jet. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
At 40 years old, Burma the elephant is past the point of breeding and ready for the golden years. After many breeding setbacks with their other elephant, Anjali, Auckland Zoo made the decision to move on the 2 elephants last year. Anjali crossed the ditch to Taronga Western Plains Zoo last March, but Burma's plans were cancelled when Australia Zoo pulled the pin just a week before her one-way flight in April. Finding a new home for such a large animal is no easy task. There's a long list of criteria.
That combination of factors makes it actually quite challenging to find somewhere suitable for her. And believe me, we've been looking all over the world.
Yeah, how many places do you think?
I have lost count.
Zoo director Kevin Bewley believes they've found a perfect match at Manato Safari Park in South Australia. But there's a catch. Zoo South Australia needs another $2 million so they can build an elephant habitat at the safari park for Asian elephants within the Australasian region. That could provide a new home for Burma and 2 other elephants from Perth Zoo in a similar position. Kevin Bewley says it's an ideal situation.
If you added up all of the accredited zoos in Australia together, then that's approximately the size of Manato Safari Park. It's huge. But it's not just the size, it's the fact that Burma's going to be there with other elephants.
Auckland Zoo will know by the end of October whether the fundraising campaign has been successful. Then Burma could be moving to her new home in late 2024. These zoo goers have mixed reactions, saying goodbye once again.
We actually didn't know that she was moving. It's so sad though. I don't know. I just hope she finds a nice home, with more elephants around.
This is one of the reasons we come here. So it's just going to be so sad.
Well, I guess you've got to kind of put them first at some point, right? And if that's what's best for her.
I guess it would be sad because that's the only one here, but then it's probably better off for the elephant. If it's a better environment. She's on her own here, isn't she? Yeah. I think it would probably be the right move.
In the meantime, Burma is continuing her crate training in preparation for her move, being well fed with plant treats and getting some well-deserved playtime. Kevin Bewley says while she's happy, it's important she becomes part of a herd. He says the zoo will always be her home. She spent over 30 years of her life here.
It'll be a really sad day when she goes, but the team here are invested so heavily in keeping her happy, so that's physical stimulation, mental stimulation. You can see she's chowing down behind me here.
Auckland Zoo is still monitoring other options for Burma. Once she goes, that will be the end of the zoo's elephant run, with no plans to get another one.
And do check out that video. It'll be on our webpage. Just to hand, the Cyclone Recovery Minister says that the 5 Hawke's Bay councils have agreed to a cost-sharing arrangement with the government. This is to do with the buyouts for Category 3 residential properties in the Hawke's Bay. It says the government will support councils to purchase homes by contributing half the net cost. And the net cost is the agreed buyout value less insurance proceeds received plus legal and transactional costs. There'll also be a package for flood protection and one for roading. Total package is worth just over $500 million, and that is the Hawke's Bay councils. And we know that Tairāwhiti and Auckland councils are still negotiating their arrangement with the government. So they're still in talks. To some of your feedback now, this one in on David Seymour and his position of not working with Winston Peters after the election. The Coalition of Confusion and Obfuscation, says this person, will they work with Winnie or not? Luxon says he won't discuss hypothetical future scenarios. Really? Aren't all future events hypothetical? But he won't rule it out. Seymour says he's so confident in the outcome he doesn't need New Zealand first. A hard no or hardly no? Who knows? Says John. Is David Seymour setting us up for an austerity agenda? I think that's in reference to the fiscal hole that the government is claimed to be facing. And another listener's got in touch and says the mystery budget hole, same as the one Stephen Joyce invented out the door in 2017, I presume. Someone asking about the app that gets rid of scam texts, Dollar, D-O-L-L-A, Dollar.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The police have revealed the missing father of three, Tom Phillips, has changed his appearance as he continues to avoid detection. The 36-year-old and his three children have not been seen since December 2021, but there were several credible sightings of him across Waikato yesterday. In one case, a person who knew him spotted him driving a stolen Toyota Hilux flat-deck ute in the Hamilton area. Inspector Will Loughran told Checkpoint Mr Phillips is taking steps to look different.
What our teams are starting to discover from CCTV that we are reviewing is that it is clear that Tom has changed his appearance and he's trying to disguise his face from the general public, wearing a face mask and a number of other things.
Inspector Loughran is urging anyone in the community who is helping the family to come forward. Hawke's Bay's 5 councils have agreed to a $500 million plan for sharing the costs of cyclone recovery with central government. They say councils and government will equally share the cost of voluntary buyouts of residential properties in areas at high risk of future flooding. The government will also spend more than $200 million on flood protection and a further $260 million on transport infrastructure, including fixing bridges. The councils say negotiating the deal took longer than expected, but it will be good for the region as a whole. A Ngāti Porou spokesperson says he'd like the government to take a stronger stance on land use in Tairawhiti and Wairoa. The Forestry Minister, Penny Henare, has been talking to the locals about the government's planned response following a damning inquiry into the damage of forestry in the region. Now, this includes speeding up the clearing of woody debris and progressing improvements around forestry management. Ngāti Porou spokesperson Hilton Collier says he would have liked to see the government strengthen some parts of its approach to the problem.
Especially those elements around mana whenua involvement, because ultimately mana whenua will be here in 100 years. So I'm pretty confident my great-grandchildren will live with decisions we make today.
Hilton Collier says mana whenua need to be part of the decision-making process. ACT's leader David Seymour has definitively ruled out working with New Zealand First's leader Winston Peters in any form in a government. Last night's News Hub Reid Research poll put New Zealand First on 4.1% support, not far off the 5% threshold to make it into Parliament. It's reignited questions over whether Nationals leader Christopher Luxon is prepared to do a deal with Mr Peters after the election. Mr Seymour told Checkpoint he thinks Mr Luxon is ultimately too principled.
While it's entertaining and it's fun to speculate, I don't think anyone's going to seriously believe that having New Zealand First, giving them another chance after all the others they've had, is in New Zealand's best interest right now.
Winston Peters says the ACT leader is being unhelpful and childish with his remarks. MPs have confronted the Iranian ambassador during a heated meeting at Parliament today. Reza Nazar Ahari appeared before the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Committee and defended Iran's response to protests in the country, which he said were being fuelled by foreign interference. Hundreds of people have died during the protests and thousands more detained, which started after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody. Labour MP Ibrahim Omer, who is the only Muslim member of Parliament, said the actions of the Iranian regime were tainting Islam.
When I see Islam is being dragged into this, and it angers me, it frustrates me, because, like I said, I'm a proud Muslim. Islam is being used as a tool to torture, to oppress, to kill women and girls.
Green MP Goraz Garaman served the ambassador with a letter condemning the response to the protests on behalf of the Greens, as well as some photos of people who were detained or executed. The US has ordered some of its diplomatic staff in Niger to leave the US embassy in the wake of the military coup in the West African nation. European nations have already begun evacuating citizens from the country. Our correspondent Ira Spitzer has more.
A State Department spokesperson said that given the ongoing developments in Niger and out of an abundance of caution, the department was ordering the temporary departure of non-emergency U.S. government personnel and their families. However, U.S. officials say the core staff will remain in the country's capital, Niamey. Last week, military leaders ousted the country's democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum. Niger has been an important ally for the U.S. and European countries in regional struggles against Islamist insurgencies linked to groups such as the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda.
Israel's Supreme Court will later today hear an appeal that seeks to overturn a law limiting the power of judges to quash government decisions they deem unreasonable. The legislation was passed by the Israeli parliament last week. And Aucklanders have shown a mixed reaction to the mayor's vision for the ports of Auckland, with one saying there are more pressing issues for council to invest in. Mayor Wayne Brown and the governing body met behind closed doors this week to discuss the future of the ports, including plans for a tidal pool and a water-based amphitheatre. Secondary teacher Rebecca says the investment doesn't make sense.
It's quite ironic to consider an entertainment centre down on the port, given that it's going to be underwater soon if we do nothing about climate change.
Another Aucklander says she looks forward to a more cultural-focused waterfront, similar to cities like San Francisco. Others told RNZ they want more visitor attractions. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, Jez Merdinger is the co-author of the Long COVID Handbook, along with Dr. Danny Altman, whom we spoke to a couple of weeks ago. Merdinger has the long COVID. Anna Funder loved George Orwell. Then she discovered the woman he married, Eileen. Now she needs doublethink. And it's been 10 years since Emojipedia was founded by Jeremy Burge. So how do you use them properly? Call Kim Hillaho. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland mainly fine, isolated showers. Waikato to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Frosty tonight and tomorrow morning. Taihape to Kapiti, partly cloudy with isolated showers, fine tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, a few showers retreating to the east coast tomorrow and becoming fine elsewhere. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland mainly fine, isolated showers in southern Marlborough. A few showers for Westland and Buller tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, remaining showers clearing. Fine and frosty tomorrow, then showers spreading north tomorrow evening. Southland and Fiordland, showers about Fiordland and the south coast. Rain spreading north tomorrow afternoon, with snow possible above 600 metres, then clearing at night. For the Chatham Islands, periods of rain, possibly heavy with hail, southwest gales, but all easing tomorrow. RNZ National, it is 6:07 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Ngā mihi, Anna. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. An investigation into the fatal boat accident in Kaikoura has found a fuel leak may have contributed to the deaths of 5 passengers. The vessel Eyecatcher, chartered for a bird-watching trip, overturned in Goose Bay last September with 11 people on board. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission is now calling on Maritime New Zealand to improve its boat survey systems. Samantha G has more.
A group of keen photographers set out from Kaikoura's South Bay on an 8-metre aluminium vessel to photograph seabirds on a calm spring day.
At 10:05 a.m, the Eyecatcher rapidly capsized after contact with what initial inquiry suggests was a whale. The skipper and 5 passengers climbed onto the upturned hull. The skipper called 111 and the Maritime Operations Centre issued Mayday relays.
That's the Commission's Chief Investigator of Accidents, Naveen Kozupakalam, describing the events of last September the 10th.
The responding vessels recovered the 5 passengers from on top of the upturned hull. Later that day, the Police National Dive Squad retrieved the 5 other passengers from within the capsized vessel deceased. Evidence reviewed by the Commission's medical consultant identified that all deceased passengers showed symptoms of petrol exposure, consistent with inhalation and absorption of petrol fumes.
He says it's the first time the Commission have investigated an incident of this kind.
Flaws in the vessel's fuel system almost certainly allowed fuel to leak into the air pocket of the upturned vessel and very likely reduced the survivability of the accident.
The Eyecatcher had been surveyed 5 times during its 13 years commercial service, but there was no inspection of the fuel system beneath the deck. Survey reports had not identified a hole in the vent tube or that the secondary fuel tank vent was ineffective.
The real message that we wanted to sort of bring out here is the risk that fuel systems pose to recreational and commercial vessels, and the importance of ensuring that fuel systems are inspected as a whole, as opposed to only those parts that can be easily and readily visible.
Take Chief Commissioner Jane Mears says given the urgent safety issues identified, they released the preliminary report today while the investigation is ongoing.
As outlined by the Chief Investigator, there's a potentially lethal issue with commercial boat fuel systems, and to address this, the Transport Accident Investigation Commission is calling on Maritime New Zealand to use an appropriate mechanism that ensures the integrity and safety of fuel systems that are being maintained and monitored through the survey system.
She says the recommendations affect tens of thousands of vessels.
This is certainly about more than just the eye catcher. It's system-wide and nationwide, because there are hundreds of boats in our commercial fleet like the eye catcher and tens of thousands more in our recreational fleet. And everyone on board a boat deserves for it to be safe.
It's now over to Maritime New Zealand to improve its system for boat surveys.
How our recommendations are implemented is something very much that Maritime New Zealand will be working with surveyors to decide. It's not our job to say how they're going to do this, but we just have identified that there is this systemic safety issue with fuel systems that we need them to address in the best possible way.
In a statement, Maritime New Zealand's Deputy Chief Executive of Regulatory Operations, Deb Despard, says it's acting on the recommendations and engaging with vessel surveyors, owners and operators, and maritime industry organisations. Maritime New Zealand is also investigating the incident and is yet to make a decision on any enforcement action.
Auckland's Mayor Wayne Brown has unveiled a vision of how he'd like the waterfront to look under his mission to claw back land currently used by the port. The governing body met behind closed doors this week to discuss the future of the downtown area. They are considering how best to convert parts of the port to public use, including proposals for a tidal pool, a water-based amphitheatre and an exhibition centre. Some Aucklanders are not impressed, while others say it would be an attraction for the city. Our reporter Lucy has more.
Aucklander Cole Parkinson says it isn't clear how freight and imports will be dealt with under the new proposal.
It's going to increase our logistic problems that we already have, especially with importing goods from overseas. If they want to improve the ports, then they probably need to improve everything else first.
And secondary teacher Rebecca says the investment doesn't make sense.
It's quite ironic to consider an entertainment centre down on the port, given that it's going to be underwater soon if we do nothing about climate change.
Rebecca says it's a waste of money and council needs to get its priorities right.
I'd be interested to know in what way this really serves the interests of Aucklanders and the needs that most Aucklanders feel are the most pressing right now.
But others feel optimistic about the opportunities a new harbour brings.
That would be fantastic to have more of a cultural and visitor focus down on the waterfront, like other cities, for instance, San Francisco.
I think that is a good thing, because that would definitely invite more people over to see Auckland.
Meanwhile, Mayor Wayne Brown says there is a way to return part of the ports to public use within the next 2 to 5 years without undermining the port operation. But the Maritime Union says the future of the ports of Auckland has financial implications for all Aucklanders and should be a wider public debate. Its National Secretary Craig Harrison says many businesses in and beyond Auckland rely on this port. He says he's also worried about Council's considerations of selling the lease of the port and how this may increase freight costs. Craig Harrison says the discussions needs to be part of a national ports strategy.
There needs to be a real conversation about a port strategy for the Upper North Island and the region. And how does that tie into becoming a carbon neutral in our freight tasks? So having an ad hoc debate or decision made on, for instance, on one little port, which is the Port of Auckland, will have massive effects.
Ports of Auckland says it's been working with the Mayor's office and Eke Panuku on the matter. Its CEO Roger Gray says the return of Captain Cook and Marsden Wharves to public use depends on the ability to maintain port operations through investment on the Bledisloe Wharf.
Former All Blacks captain Kieran Reid believes the All Blacks have a great chance of winning this year's World Cup, but he says they're not the favourites to take the title in France. The All Blacks take on Australia in the second Bledisloe Cup test in Dunedin this weekend, though the match is a dead rubber, with the hosts having already retained the title and the Rugby Championship following 3 straight wins to start 2023. It is, however, the last chance for players to impress before coach Ian Foster names his Rugby World Cup squad on Monday in Napier. Reid spoke to RNZ's rugby reporter Joe Porter about his picks for the squad, who he thinks will win the World Cup, and what he's made of the All Blacks' early season form.
Well, they've been impressive, most definitely, as probably everyone's seen them. There's a lot of questions after last year, and the probably from my point of view is the manner of their performance, which left a few questions and where we're going. And this year they've certainly answered a few of them. And I know within the group they've got such a committed, driven group to succeed, and a lot of guys in there that have been to World Cups before. Some had won one in 15. Obviously Sam, who's still there, has won one in 11 as well. But a lot of the guys went through 19 and didn't. And so that drives you. And so they've got a great group, and you can tell probably this year they've been very well coached, and so things are ticking along pretty nicely right now.
Yeah, they seem to be going all guns blazing. Do you think they're taking a different approach to this World Cup year than they have in the past, or does it seem familiar to you?
A World Cup's a World Cup. It's the biggest thing in our sport. It raises everything, the pressure, expectations, and so there's not too much difference in that respect. But I guess where the All Blacks have been over the last few years, where they haven't been ranked number one, they've dropped down a few places. The expectation hasn't quite been there. I think this All Black team could be one of our greatest, going overseas and winning against some really great sides around the world. So France and Ireland, probably the two that stand out to me still as favourites and the top teams right now. But I think we've got such a great chance to go and make some great history and get another title. And
the All Blacks World Cup squad is named on Monday. Do you think all those loose forwards that are in that Rugby Championship squad make it? And if someone doesn't, who's the unlucky person there?
I think it's a tough one in terms of selection on how many guys they do take in that position, like the mix of locks and loosies. Probably the guy who I could see coming in is Ethan Blackadder, but he's obviously got a question mark around his fitness. I think I'd personally give him the chance. So if he can be fit by the World Cup, I think you'd take him. So that's my view. And it's probably, I'm not too sure. It's Samapeni Finau is probably the one who hasn't had the opportunity so far. I think he's a great young player. He's going to play a lot for the All Blacks. But you look at the mix of the guys we've got there, a lot of experience in the other positions. Frizzell's obviously stepped up a lot this year and probably put his name on that number 6 jersey. So, some good competition.
And that was former All Blacks captain Kieran Reid, who was talking to Joe Porter there. It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And while the use of drones to attack targets has become commonplace, they can also be used for good by being used to locate wounded soldiers on the battlefield. CNN's Nick Patton-Walsh reports on the survival of one Ukrainian soldier.
It is usually only the dead lying here in the craters of Ukraine's southern front, but sometimes a glint of life shines. This drone spotting a Ukrainian soldier, Sergei, separated from his unit. Wounded in the chest and leg by shelling, he filmed this as he lay alone, bleeding. He feared whatever fight to live he put up would not be enough, he later told CNN from his hospital bed.
I was ready to fight for my life, and I did, even lying there under the blazing sun. I realized I was too close to the Russians, and you even start to look at your gun in a different way.
But the drone operators had other plans. They attached water, medicine and a note to the drone and sent it back. It found him again and dropped the package. But he didn't know if it was friendly or a Russian bomb.
All the time I was crawling, a drone was always hovering above. We didn't realize if it was friend or foe. It was a lottery.
This is the moment he realises the drone may save him. The water and medicine kept coming, easing the pain that was visible even from up high, and then he crawled back to safety.
The combat medics who gave me first aid when they found me were very surprised I survived for 2 days with a pierced lung.
Serhi's recovering and talks now of a new life with greater value and purpose. They don't want to leave anyone behind, said the drone operator. Every life is important to us. I could not live with myself if we just left someone behind in the field. Probably only several miles away, salvation was uglier. Here is a Ukrainian assault by the 15th National Guard on a Russian position. It is ferocious and eventually forced a dozen Russian troops to pull back. Artillery had injured the Russian commander badly, and the Russians left him behind, presuming he was dead. But this video supplied by Ukrainian forces shows they found him alive. And he received medical treatment. We're not naming him for his safety, but he was later awarded a posthumous medal, according to Russian media reports. Left behind and declared dead by his comrades. The Ukrainians who found him say he may have wished he didn't survive. We said, don't try anything or you'll die, he says. And he asked us to shoot him. And we offered him a chance to do it himself, but he said he could not do that. He's an enemy, and I had no real desire to save him. But orders are orders, and they have our guys, and we can swap prisoners. As a human, another says, I was shocked that they had left him behind. But as a soldier, I know my enemy, and I know it's not an uncommon practice for them. The opposite fates on different sides in these wide, ugly expanses of violence.
Scientists say a strange, dangerous habit of targeting and ramming into small boats is spreading through a population of critically endangered orcas. Research shows 20 of the fewer than 60 Iberian orcas in the Atlantic have now learned the behaviour. It is believed that one or two of the animals started interacting with and damaging vessels 3 years ago along the coast of Spain, Portugal and the Strait of Gibraltar. The BBC's Victoria Gill has been finding out more.
The
sound of a nervous sailing crew in Gibraltar as 5 orcas nudge, ram and spin their yacht around. This incident in July is one of at least 100 this year, and scientists are trying to work out what's driving this strange new habit of targeting and damaging sailing boats. Researchers have studied footage and photographs of some of the latest encounters between sailing vessels and orcas and concluded that up to 20 animals in this small population have now learned to do this by copying others.
It's only a game. It's not revenge, it's not climate change or nothing like that. It's just game and that's it.
Dr. Renard de Stefanis is president of a marine conservation organisation in southern Spain. He's studied this critically endangered population of Iberian orcas since the 1990s. He says the animals appear to focus their attention on the boat's rudder. In this underwater recording, you can hear an orca shove the vessel's rudder with its head. Dr. de Stefanis and his colleagues are currently attaching satellite tracking tags to the animals' fins to map their movements.
Thanks to the satellite tagging, we're able to know exactly how to say the sailing boats and motorboats to leave the area and to not cross the main area of the killways.
As large and powerful as these marine mammals are, scientists and conservationists are concerned that they're putting themselves at risk, as well as testing our willingness to share the ocean with its wildlife.
When Australia's Great Barrier Reef escaped being listed as in danger earlier this week, it was largely due to record government funding for programs to help protect it. But across the Pacific, countries are battling shoestring budgets as they try to protect coral reefs from threats including marine heat waves. Here's the ABC's Marianne Farr.
Experts say funding for reef management in the Pacific leaves much to be desired. Rahul Tikaram is a coastal marine specialist with the Pacific's peak environmental body, SPREP.
Pacific Island countries, as you know, are small economies, and as such, in most cases, the budget for allocation to marine and environmental work is pretty much lagging behind than what is required.
The Australian government has pledged $1 billion to manage the Great Barrier Reef until 2030. By comparison, the budget for Fiji's entire Environment Department is just $5 million over the next financial year.
So, moving ahead, there's need for development assistance.
It's something Fimareti Selu understands all too well, working for Samoa's Environment Department. Alongside the government, Samoa has just one NGO managing 9 coral restoration sites.
We're very concerned because we have restoration projects going on, but it's not enough to tackle the effects that the El Nino will cause.
The topic has been front of mind at a Pacific Reef Forum in Cairns this week. Dr. Mark Reid, Director of Field Management Strategy with the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, says an El Nino increases the risk of coral bleaching.
And that can mean that we'll actually have hotter, stiller conditions on the reef, so therefore the chances of having a marine heat wave can be increased.
The 5-day conference aims to increase collaboration between reef stewards in Australia and the Pacific.
Windsor Castle's round tower reopens later today for the first time since before the COVID lockdown. For a limited time, visitors will get a chance to climb the tower's 200 steps to get to its roof and take in the views of the castle grounds. The round tower will only be open in August and September. The BBC's Daniela Ralph has more.
Within the grounds of Windsor Castle, the round tower looms large. Dating back to 1170, it's had some upgrades over the years, but had to close during the COVID lockdown. Now, the doors are open again, for those of us who can face the 200 steps to the very top. Much of what you see inside hasn't been touched in centuries. The wooden roof has been here since the 1400s. And you'll get up close to the Sebastopol bell. Installed during the reign of Queen Victoria, it's only ever rung following the death of the monarch. As you emerge onto the lower parapet, you're around halfway up. You'll get a chance to pause and take in the signs of the fortress that this tower once was.
It's at this point on the climb up that visitors are told to put their phones and their cameras away. Photos are banned because beyond the castle walls here are the royal family's private apartments.
There are now 100 steps to go, up the narrower spiral staircase. If you're nervous of heights, maybe don't look down. As we head to the highest point, the top of the tower, 65 metres up. On a clear day, the views are spectacular. The expanse of the long walk through Windsor Great Park is more impressive from up here. And as you do the circuit around the rooftop, you can also peer down into the grounds of the castle itself. Hear the lower ward around St George's Chapel. And take a look around the corner, you'll see the River Thames as well as Eton.
Tell us, do you need a head for heights to do this particular tour?
It does help if you have a head for heights. However, I don't have a great head for heights, but people, when they get up here, are so wowed by what you can see, you actually forget about it. We don't call it Conquer the Tower for nothing.
There is so much detail to take in. You can look through the arrow slits put in to enhance the castle defences, and even look down through what were called the murder holes, designed to target any enemy below.
These views are about offering visitors something different. A chance to see a part of the castle that isn't open to the public for most of the year, with a unique perspective over Windsor.
And if you time your climb just right, you'll find yourself with a special look at the changing of the guard. This is a tour which gives you a bird's eye view of British history.
200 steps, though it does seem like it is worth the effort. That is all we have got time for this evening. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. And don't forget, if you missed anything from the show, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Pōpō. Tomorrow from 5 a.m, first up, bids farewell to a local hero, one of our own, the unsurpassable RNZ legend, Paul Bushnell. That man can turn a tea trolley on a dime, and there is no shame like being told you're in the wrong parking spot by Paul. He's a fire warden, a wrangler and a chicken herder, a legend.
He is indeed. Now time for the 6:30 headlines, and police say Tom Phillips, the Waikato man missing with his 3 children since December 2021, has likely changed his appearance. Yesterday saw 3 credible sightings of the 36-year-old, including him driving a stolen Toyota Hilux ute in the Hamilton area. Hawke's Bay's 5 councils and the government will equally share the $500 million bill for voluntary residential property buyouts in high-risk flood areas. The government will also spend $460 million on flood protection and transport infrastructure. A survey of 500 firms by small business lender Prosper